As promised, we have some Australian Open to break down. No one better I'd rather do it with than Pam Maldonado. You might have seen her on the huddle, but we'd like to, see some versatility on the show. So Pam is joining. She is a tennis extraordinaire, and she's going to help us break down the first major of the year. Pam, really appreciate you joining the show.
No, absolutely. Every time I have an opportunity to talk tennis, football, what is that? It's time. It's PJ is back. ATP tennis is back. I'm all in.
Yeah, Super Wild Card Weekend. Never heard of her. That's fine. And I love tennis is the kind of sport where there's so much value, but it's not a popular sport to bet on a lot of times that you can throw these big numbers at people and they're like, well, why didn't I get on this before? And you're like, well, I tried to tell you. And I don't think there is a more fun sport to bet on live. I don't know if you agree, but
No,
that
absolutely. There's an opportunity. There's a thing called momentum, and momentum 100% exists, especially in a best of five tournament. A player can be
mhm.
down two sets to love, but the weather gets a little bit cooler. The surface changes. It either strengthens in speed because it's sunny out, or because it's nighttime and it slows down a bit. Well, that can benefit the player who is down two sets to love, and then all of a sudden you see them bounce back and not only win the match but go on in for a deep run. So momentum is a thing in tennis. I love live betting in ATP, especially.
It is a sport that really just recognizes and puts an advantage for someone who can make it through potentially a 3 hour match. Without further ado, we're going to start on the men's side. We're going to be breaking down both men's and women's draw, some winners you're looking at, or some fun bets either from the first day or just in general. So starting on the men's side here, we got the draw late last night. Obviously, Novak Djokovic is back in the fold of things after missing last year's tournament. Tell me if someone really got screwed over by a draw here, if someone has a pretty easy path, because there are answers to both, I feel like.
Well, let's start first with the easy path, and that is going to be spoiler alert Novak Djokovic. He is in prime position here to not only win another major here at Australian Open, but to now put himself in position to tie the Grand Slam record with Rafael Nadal. He does have a fairly easy draw in that he will not be tested here until the later rounds, until potential matchup, third round matchup to Pablo Carreño Busta. But to me, that's a warm up match. Djokovic has already used half of 2022 season. He spent most of the time out because of his vaccination status. But now that he's back on court, he closed out the 2022 year pretty strong. He had 13 wins in his last 14. But if you look at the one match that he lost to, it was against an up and coming player in Holger Rune, who he could eventually end up facing here in the later rounds. Now I expect Novak Djokovic to get through because this is a best of five. Mental game comes into play, momentum comes into play, experience largely comes into play. Now, because this is a best of five, I like to look at players also who have a better feel at stamina, who know when to kind of ease off, take in, be aggression, and that is Novak Djokovic. He is the number one world returner in the world for a reason because he has the best return game in the world. He has a solid serve. He just has all of the weapons. He's part of the big three for a reason, but he's coming into this pretty refreshed. Towards the end of the year, he upped his reps. He beat everybody. He has a strong mental mindset, and he has no hard feelings about the 2022 Australian Open, which he missed. He seems to be in good spirits, so he's ready to attack this. This is his tournament to lose, and his draw is pretty favorable for him to do so.
Yeah, and he's coming in with momentum as well. You mentioned how he missed some time last year. Already has picked up some wins this year, and there is a reason he is the favorite to win this tournament. Is there anyone that you looked at and you were like, "Oh man, this could not have gone worse for you in terms of a draw, or at least just a little harder than it should be"?
I think that's the entire fourth quarter of the draw. For me, the fourth quarter doesn't provide any value into picking an outright to win the fourth quarter, but it is much must-watch TV. If you're a fan like me and changing your hours from US time to Australian time to watch, you want to watch the fourth quarter because there's a lot of young players in the mix that have a chance here to come out with the quarter and see themselves in the semifinals. You have Matteo Berrettini, who's coming back from injury, Casper Ruud, who's been one of the best clay quarters on tour, who really excelled here on the hard court towards the latter end of the
Mhm.
season. Taylor Fritz, the American that we're all interested in backing. And then
Yeah.
a younger player in Jensen Brooksby, who kind of had a really solid breakout year in 2022. They're all in the same quarter. So this draw is purely dependent on matchup. I love myself. I really want to find myself taking Taylor Fritz here, but he doesn't have a good history here at the Australian Open. He has a 9-6 record. His best appearance was a round of 16, losing to Tsitsipas in 5 sets. But he has had strides in his game. He's trying to find his rhythm. His forehand has gone stronger. His backhand has gone stronger. He has one of the best serves on tour. This is a different Taylor Fritz than we're used to seeing, and he wants to create some new data points here. He wants to make new strides. And then you have Casper Ruud, who has really made strides. He's known as a clay court player, but he really did exceptionally well on hard court last year. He made it to the finals in Miami. He made it to his first major final at the US Open, eventually losing to winner Carlos Alcaraz in 4 sets. But the problem for me in backing Casper is that we haven't really seen Ruud play much since. He played the ATP finals and the United Cup, but he's maybe perhaps out of all the players here in this quarter, coming into this with less reps, out of rhythm. And then you have somebody like Matteo Berrettini, who is the best 1-2 punch on tour, one of the best serves, if not the best, has a solid, strong forehand. He was also out from injury. Now he's been back in the mix, playing fairly well at the United Cup. But what I like seeing from him is that the weakest part of Berrettini's game has been on the backhand. It is something that you can attack, and it really exposed him when you're playing against big time players like Novak Djokovic, where he's only been able to get 1 set off of him, and it's because of the backhand. Well, at the United Cup, he's showing that he's trying to make improvements in that area, because now he's coming over the top with his backhand a bit more as opposed to just slicing. So that is showing me that he's willing to mix it up, try things out in order to become a better player. So for me, everybody in the fourth quarter has a really bad draw, and it's wide open for me.
Yeah, and Casper is someone that I was backing and someone that I like in this tournament, but for whatever reason you mentioned, just lack of recent play, and just the fact that if you don't watch as intently, because there are so many tournaments, it's tough to keep track sometimes.
Mhm.
If you don't watch so intently, that fourth quarter might look like an easy draw for him, but it is far from easy. I want to ask, now that the draw has come out, if you've taken a look at any of these opening games, in terms of just anything you're eyeing, because we don't have an exact start time, and we're still a couple days out. But if
Right.
there's any kind of first look odds at any first round matchup.
So at the time of recording, it is Thursday. So the first matchup that we
Mhm.
won't see will be until Sunday evening, and Monday in Australian time is when it starts. But there's a couple of matches that I'm interested in. I'm already locking in as far as I'm going to keep my eye on, and one of those is backing Fabio Fognini +6 games or +sets against Thanasi Kakanakis. He right now, Kakanakis is in the semifinal of Adelaide 2. That is happening right now as we speak. He's in the semifinal round tomorrow morning. If Kakanakis wins this tournament, which I believe he has a solid chance of doing so because he is playing exceptionally well. This is some of the best tennis that he's played in a solo event that's not doubles. He's defeated Andrei Rublev. He defeated Mitomir Kecmanovic. Those are two really solid players. Tomorrow morning, he gets one of the better tours, one of the better returners on tour in Roberto Batista Agut, who I also believe he can get past just because of, I'm talking about rhythm, I'm talking about momentum. He has that right now. So now if Kakanakis wins this tournament, he solidly becomes a first round fade against Fonini, who can just flip it on the dime. If he feels like playing, he's gonna want to play. So I would be looking to Fabio Fonini, maybe not as an outright win, but to keep this
Mhm.
competitive, maybe go over in sets, but +6 games would be the play for me.
Okay, interesting. I like it. I like it. And Fognini is someone who's been around for a long time. He knows how to play someone, especially if you're coming in with a little more tired legs, coming off some big plays.
And he
Let's
shows
talk
up for
about some.
majors. He kind of takes it
Yeah.
easy in some of these smaller events, but he's one of those where it's like, hey, this is a major. It kind of means a little bit more, so I'm going to try a little bit harder. And then he becomes a nuisance to you, and that's
He
not
is.
an opponent that you want to get in the first round, especially when you've been playing a lot of tennis and you're running deep into a tournament that you're not used to running. Now, there is one
Mhm.
other matchup that I also want to bring up, and it's going to be
Okay.
probably opposite of what a majority of people are kind of indicating right now. I really do like Rafael Nadal -3.5, or at the price of -190 on the money line, which you may find a better price come match time. over Jack
Hmm.
Draper. Jack Draper right now is getting a
Hmm.
whole bunch of hype. He's a Great Britain player, 6'4". He is a lefty though, and this is what people kind of don't pay attention to when it comes to tennis. You can see the momentum of somebody. They're doing well, they're playing well, they're getting a lot of reps. It looks like they're well on their way to becoming like an up and coming breakout player. You have to look at, are they left-handed, right-handed? Because Rafael Nadal is the best player. He's a lefty himself, and Draper is 21 years old. He has 6 total matches played in a major. Experience comes into play. His most recent loss was Cam Norrie. Nadal against lefties. He absolutely owns lefties. In his career,
Hmm.
114 wins, only 17 losses. Some of those losses came to Cam Norrie and just recently at the United Cup. But I would be more interested in Draper if he did not have straight set losses to both Karen Khachanov and Francis Tiafoe. Now, can he take a set off of Nadal? Maybe, but I'm saying that this is going to be Nadal in 4 sets or better. This is where he kind of rebounds and finds his game again.
Okay, all right. So you have you have two starting matches for our opening day. Let's talk about some overall tournament winners now. We talked a little bit about Casper. You talked me down from my pick, so that's great for me. Of course, no Alcaraz dealing with injury. Tell me who your pick is for this tournament.
My pick to win is Novak Djokovic at minus 120. It is juiced, but it is warranted. He is the best player, not only
Or
in this field, but on tour. And he's coming out for, call it a revenge spot. He didn't get to play the Australian Open last year because of his vaccination status. If you remember that, it was a lot of stress. This is his tournament to lose. Favorable draw. He can handle it. He's already done well. He has the reps. All the reps that he lost from the 2022 season, he more than made up for it to close out the year. So he's coming into this fresh. Now, my one worry would be that potentially he has a hamstring injury. But if you know Novak Djokovic, you know that he is doing absolutely everything he can right now to repair that so that he can be able to play 2 weeks of best of 5 tennis. And he's the most flexible player on tour for a reason. He doesn't get these types of injuries. So I would imagine that he's doing something to repair that. I do want to throw out a long shot, and I'm
hit me.
let me see if you would agree with me on this. Because the question always becomes, if it is not the favorite to win the tournament, and right now that would be Novak Djokovic. So if it's not
Hmm.
him, who's it going to be? I'm going to throw a name into the hat, and I'm going to throw out Stefanos Tsitsipas. Now Novak is
Okay.
10-2 over Stefanos, but Stefanos Tsitsipas is coming into this with some not only just form, but he's coming into this like on the edge of a breakout of finally getting that major that he's been trying. So 5 sets at 2020 Roland Garros, 5 sets at the 2021 Roland Garros. Those were slower courts, but the thing to look at is the 2022 ATP Paris. Tsitsipas almost won that match against Djokovic. They went to a third set tiebreak. Tsitsipas is getting close. He himself has a favorable draw. The only potential player that could come into play would be Yannick Sinner, who could end up facing. But Tsitsipas has a winning record against him. He was up 2 sets to love at Wimbledon, got demolished. Sinner got demolished in the last 3 sets, and that was against Novak Djokovic. Now, I believe that he did so well and only came right back down to earth immediately was because it was Djokovic himself who was playing Sinner incorrectly, more so than it was Sinner who was blowing Djokovic out of the water. So if there was a long shot for me to take, it would be Stefanos Tsitsipas at 14-1.
Honestly, that's not that crazy, and kind of not in the same range. But as someone like Medvedev, it's just like, all right, it's going to happen eventually,
Right.
and you know they're right there, but it just hasn't happened yet. Tsitsipas is someone who has certainly been on that range for, honestly, it feels like at this point just an unjust amount of time.
Yeah. And
I
the thing
do, I do. Yeah, go ahead.
And the way that you want to beat somebody like a Novak Djokovic, you're talking about the best player in the world. How do you beat them? And that is by adding variety to your game. And at the end of the 2022 season, you saw that from Stefanos Tsitsipas. He showed you that he was trying to become that player that Carlos Alcaraz was in 2022, which was coming into the net more, concentrating on working that forehand strength into his rallies, putting the ball away quickly instead of extending the point and putting yourself in situations that you can't really get out of. His backhand, Stefanos Tsitsipas, has always been the weak point. He's missing that down the line shot, but it's just not aggressive. But I see him right now as a taller early version of Roger Federer. He just needs to come into the net more. And when he does, he's a very difficult opponent to face. And that is the problem when you face Novak Djokovic. If you can put Novak Djokovic to come in back up into the net and then back behind the baseline, yeah, you become attacked. That becomes a tactic that you can knock him off his socks and potentially come out with an upset.
That's some big words. You compare someone to a Roger Federer type, but I honestly, if you're doing it, then I'm all in. I've heard I've heard all I need to. I want to shift over to the women's side of things now. That draw also coming out. You do have the number one on the women's side playing in the tournament as well. Just real quick, looking at the draw, anything really catch your attention?
Now, before we started recording, you did mention to me that you yourself had Io Swiatek at plus 225 to win the tournament. This is not the tournament. I know she is the best player in the world on tour in the WTA in a best of three. Absolutely, she can defeat anybody, but this is not her strongest surface. Conditions do matter. You're playing in Australia. The temperatures are going to get
Mhm.
really hot. Now, the faster the surface, Iga Swiatek, she does really well on slower surfaces. She likes that clay court play. And her draw, she has been the benefactor of fairly easy draws for a long time now. If you look at this
That's
draw for
fair.
Swiatek, it is very difficult. Potential quarterfinal opponents could be Coco Gauff, Qinwen Shang, Badosa, Ostapenko. It's just a very difficult draw. And she's possibly coming into this with a shoulder injury. She's had a couple of
Mhm.
interviews where she said that it's bothering her. You've seen it come to play in her recent matches where she's losing in straight sets. She's not coming into this with the best of form. Can she still beat anybody? 100%. But this is not the tournament for her. I would be looking further down the board.
That's super fair, and we'll get into that in a second. Before we get to winners for this tournament, though, we'll start with our kind of first round matchup. Again, it's early, but did anything catch your eye to at least keep monitoring as we get closer to first service?
Going along the same line of thought for fading Swiatek in the tournament, I'm looking to fade her in the head-to-head matchup, and her first round is going to be a tough one. It's against Julie Niemier. The temperatures in that first round are supposed to be in the high 80s. I talked about the conditions and how they matter. The warmer the weather,
Mhm.
the faster the surface speed. Now you're getting 7-1 for an upset win over Iga Swiatek in their first round. If you don't believe that Swiatek is going to lose, at least look to the over 18.5. This potentially could be going 3 sets. I expect Julie Niemier to have more of a competitive edge here just because of the surface, because she's coming into this with injury, and because it's not her best surface. So I'm looking to fade Io Swiatek early on.
Okay, we'll jump right into the winners here, and I know tennis is not the best sport to say this at, but you get the number one in the world, and someone who, like you mentioned, you can beat anyone, and sure, some surfaces better than others, but can beat anyone anywhere at any given time. You get her at plus money and not at like plus 105. Like that is something I'm at least looking at. Now it's not going to get as much of my bankroll as like a Djokovic, or even if you're putting on Medvedev or Ruud or someone like that. But this seems like too good of a number to not at least sprinkle some on.
Yeah.
Can you back me up there at least?
Yeah. What was the player that you looked at?
For so Sviatek was my
Oh, plus
number one.
225. Yeah. So
Yeah.
as mentioned, I'm not interested in backing her. I want to look further down the board because in WTA, there is a lot of value going for those long shots. In a best of
Hmm.
five major tournament for ATP, there's a reason why you constantly see players like Rafael Nadal, Novak Djokovic win because they're so dominant in a best of five. WTA
Hmm.
in majors still remains a best of three, so it becomes a lot more volatile. Now, the plus 225 seems enticing because it is the number one player in the world and she's won so many titles before. But as mentioned, this isn't her best surface, possibly coming into this injured. So further down the board, who I like, Jessica Pegula at 20-1 odds. She's in the top half of the
Hmm.
draw. She just recently beat Swiatek 6-2, 6-2 in the United Cup semifinals. That is a beatdown by any standards if you're talking about Swiatek. Now she raced to a 5-0 lead in the first set and kept the pace and the momentum. That tells me that she has a strong mental mindset and is not at all worried about who is on the opposite end of her. She also reached the quarterfinals in 3 majors. She beat 4 Grand Slam winners en route to winning her first WTA event. That was a 1,000 event. You really need a mental mindset. You need the game, you need the momentum, you need the focus in order to complete that. And that was just in October in Guadalajara. She's now number 3 in the world. So I think Jessica Pegula has a very favorable draw as well. And you're getting 20 to 1 odds. If it's
Mhm.
only in WTA where you can take some of these long shots and possibly hit. And we've seen it before with former winners like Emma Raducanu. I mean, these long shot names that you've never even heard of, they can come into play, make deep runs, get a little bit lucky, and then that long shot ticket can cash.
Yeah, and as you see from the bottom screen on the graphic, we do not have a lot to go off of in terms of past winners, because the
Mhm.
only past winner of the last 5 years for the tournament that is playing is ranked in the hundreds at this point. I do want to ask you, Pam, for anyone who is a little new to the tennis game or is trying it out for the first time, what piece of advice do you have?
So the number one advice that I would have, watch tennis. We love watching football.
Hot take.
We love watching the sports that we like to bet on, but it is especially important when it comes to especially ATP tennis because I talked about momentum, I talked about the weather conditions, I talked about the court speeds and the surfaces and how all of that can come into play. 12 months out of the year, these players are playing on different surfaces in different countries in different parts of the world, and it just becomes so much more volatile. But once you start watching them, you get a feel for what these players like, their tendencies, what their weakness is, what their strength is. Are they better on hard court? Are they better on slow hard court? All of this matters, but you're not going to really know this. You won't get this from data and stats and analytics. You only get this type of information if you are watching. Now, I understand
Mm.
that some of these matches are in Australian time and we kind of have to change our schedule. But if you can watch a few of the matches, it would largely help you in your betting when it comes to ATP tennis.
Or what you can do is, just follow Pam on Twitter and repeat everything she says and make yourself sound
For
smart.
that, I promise.
That's a,
I
that's a
put
good
in all the
that's a good
effort.
strategy too. But you can also catch Pam every single week on the Huddle. That's our odds checker NFL pick show, and I may clip that. You talking about having to watch the game and not paying attention to analytics, and present it to Ross Tucker with zero context to see if what kind of stats he asks you for.